Okay, we are live now with another session on Adobe DITA World 2016, and this time our guest is Matt Sullivan from TechComm Tools, and he will talk about publishing DITA on all channels with FrameMaker 2015. And I stop my sharing now and hand over to Matt so that you can start sharing your screen, and then we can start the session. Welcome to everyone in the room, and welcome Matt Sullivan.
Okay, thank you so much, Stefan, for having me here. Thanks to Adobe for all of that great stuff. They have given the world's best speakers gift and given us Bose noise-canceling headphones in gratitude for being here, and I thank them very much for that. Okay, so we have publishing DITA on all channels, and as somebody else was just mentioning, it's kind of a broad topic there, so I haven't quite had the chance to thank Stefan for that, but all channels might be a little bit of an overreach to cover all this in 1 hour. We're going to narrow it down just a little bit. And the way that we're going to do that is first we're going to talk about what is being covered elsewhere. So we had connecting to AEM to reference our earlier comment there. In fact, let me take just a quick moment to get my my other screen up so I can look at that chat window at the same time. All right, and so connecting to AEM, that was one of the sessions that we did yesterday. And if I get back over to PowerPoint here. So Adobe Experience Manager is a fantastic tool and one that I've had a bit of exposure to in the last couple of months. I've known about it, known what it did, but hadn't really seen it in action. So AEM gives you the chance to optimize and automate a number of things, including machine translations of things that you load up into that content management system. Automate the PDF creation, and so that when you're modifying your content, you're coming up with updated PDFs on the fly, more or less. There's some processing time involved, of course, but it automates that process and puts it into kind of a funnel where things process all at the same time. And then for AEM customers, you're going to use that generally for delivering web content on a web server when that's localized, and when it links to PDFs, that can really grease the wheels as far as getting the information to your client. So for more specific information on that, you're going to want to go in and look at what Dustin gave yesterday. And as Stefan was saying, it sounds like we're going to have recordings available, or we're exploring the ability to make that available. If not, I'm sure if you reach out to Dustin, he'll be able to, and perhaps Stefan, you can put his email address in the chat window, and I'm sure that Dustin would be happy to share his presentation with you if he didn't already do that, or if you haven't already seen it.
Absolutely. Matt, maybe just one thing, maybe you can move your mouse cursor out of the window, so because we always have it in there. Oh, thank you.
Okay, you got it. Thanks. I'll do what I can there. I don't have my my slide advancer, so every once in a while I might sneak that back in there. Okay, so other things. So what we're going to have, what we had in the previous session, were things related to the DITA OT and perhaps customization of some of the FM init, DITA FM init files. And so Elliot did a great job of talking about what you can do with DITA OT and DITA within FrameMaker for publishing right there. So you get that session. And then, as I was mentioning right before we started recording this session, we've got the ability to go into the custom templates that FrameMaker provides and to customize all of those. You can customize the paragraph styles, you can customize the names, you can customize the output. And so I fully trust that Bernard will be using those lovely noise-canceling headphones in the next session, and he's going to be talking about that stuff. So that will kind of give you a bit of scope about what we will be talking about. So really there's 4 things I believe that we're going to talk about. It's understanding, I want to review what FrameMaker is doing in terms of taking your DITA and then using FrameMaker constructs to rapidly format that information. We want to look at, when we're doing digital publishing with FrameMaker, we want to understand what the default processing for all of that stuff is. And then look at ways that we can rapidly map the styles that we have within our DITA. We can rapidly map that content into something that will be more presentable, very quickly be presentable and be something that would be happy to put out and that represents our organization properly. Finally, along with being able to structure the content a little bit, there's the ability to brand the standards, brand the output itself to conform to our Marcom standards, logos, colors, typefaces, things like that. So those are the things, these 4 things right here are what we're really going to be looking at and focusing on. Now the sample files that I'm using, they came from the FrameMaker 2015 install directory. So that's this directory right in here, and then within the install directory, you've got the structure XML travel DITA directory, and that travel DITA directory has the files that we're going to be looking at. In case perhaps you don't want to follow along, but if you want to come in later and take a look at that, this will help you understand what it is that we're doing. So first, in terms of formatting the information within FrameMaker, as you can see, I've got, this is a screen capture because I wanted to make sure that we weren't doing too much live information, just to keep the connect load down a bit. And you can see here in this shot, I've selected the overview text inside of FrameMaker. That overview text inside the paragraph designer is being controlled or formatted by title.0. So the title.0 paragraph tag is what we're really using in order to display and represent this title element right here. As I said, Bernard will get into ways that you can customize that. For now, we just want to recognize that the mapping exists. Along with that, we've got other elements inside the doc. So I just went through and took a snapshot of the short desk, which has a paragraph tag of short.description. That'll come in later because it's the paragraph tag that we're using and leveraging in order to format. It's not the EDD, if you're familiar with that, or the element definition or anything about the DTD. It is truly the paragraph that's been assigned here. So we're making it easy to display on the page, easy to output to print and PDF, and then leveraging that same convention as we go through into our electronic outputs. Finally, the P element here is just using a straight FrameMaker body paragraph tag, more or less the default paragraph tag inside of FrameMaker. All right, and so when we're publishing it, as I just showed, we've got the ability to take those FrameMaker elements and format them using the paragraph styles. And those paragraph styles are what allow us to leverage the existing digital publishing options. And the digital publishing options are really, really cool. As Bernard just said in the chat window there, you have to pick between 3. You can only pick 3 of easy, quick, and customizable. So basically, you kind of get everything that you want in that output. And it's really intuitive. It's really straightforward. So what I've done here is gone and showed the file publish option. So when you have that, in fact, since we're doing the screen sharing, let me go back over. Okay, so in FrameMaker, I've got my DITA map open. I've got my topic open, and I'll apologize. I am working on a smaller screen than I usually would. That's why it looks a little bit crowded here. But we've got the structure view right in here. In a normal operating environment, when I'm working with structure, there really is no need to look at that paragraph designer. That's only when I'm working in the capacity of the template designer, and I'm trying to modify the look and feel of my template files, perhaps something that Bernard will show you in the next session. And the screenshot that I showed you is this file publish command right here. So when we do that, go back over to my other screen capture here. It's a little bit bigger. And when we do that, we look at the publish pod right here. And something that is available in the more recent versions of FrameMaker is the ability to publish. And in this most recent version of Frame, 2015, we've got the ability to choose a source document from among our existing open docs. And this can make it a little bit easier. It lets you do editing of a number of different files. And then once you edit those individual component files, you can come back in and not have to worry about what you have selected before you do a republish on all of that information there. Okay, so looks like I had a comment about Franz Joseph was mentioning the audio. Is it fading in and out a little bit? I'll try and watch that. So in the publish pod, we've got that ability to to pick that option right here, these buttons really just, this allows me to choose and process the formatted or the selected format right here. This is a batch formatting option right in here. And then this is to view our output. We've got about, what is it, six of the most popular formats available right here, and that's why that batch output comes in a little bit handy. And then you can see down here, I've taken the liberty of customizing, or I had customized before I took the screenshot, the settings file that we're going to look at a little bit later that allows you the capability of doing custom mapping from your paragraph or your content styles into your online representations, also allowing you to do the formatting of and the branding of your skin or your output, your overall website design, if you will. And then finally, it's just the output folder that I chose right here. So that's the file publish command right there. Now in the publish settings, you can see what I've done. If we go back into FrameMaker, I'm going to go ahead and open up that publish dialog box. And in the publish, I'm going to go ahead and click on the edit option right here. And kind of make sure you get the right thing selected. So that edit option is going to come in and give you this dialog box here that allows you to choose from all of your different paragraph styles, character styles, table styles, etc. And what I've done here is I've taken the title 0. Remember that the title element was using the title 0 inside of my document, and I've chosen to represent that using a heading 1. Now you want to keep in mind that all of these will have a default value. FrameMaker doesn't presume that you want to use any one thing to format. And so you're going to make individual choices, and this will allow you to not try and redefine what was in your template and your color choices, pagination choices. It doesn't try and interpret that into your online formats, but instead says, look, we're going to leave print alone right now. And when we take this content and we represent it with HTML5 or we represent it in an online format, this is going to allow us that control to keep the information that we edit separate from the information that we publish and that we provide to our audience. Really common options. These have been around for quite a while. For those of you that might have worked with FrameMaker to RoboHelp, this will look familiar. And so they've leveraged what was a pretty good interface in that FrameMaker to RoboHelp linking. And they've taken it about 10 steps further now, allowing us to do the style mapping in here as we did. And then once we've got that dialed in, either go in and edit the style within our style sheet right here, or if you're more comfortable with working with a CSS editor, you can go in and manage your CSS right in here. So you can export out the CSS, use any tool you like, and then import that back in, which I find to be a very efficient interface. So I like to use Adobe Dreamweaver to do my CSS work because it just is, it's got a lot of really great hinting and allows me access to things that I might otherwise have to type in or code by hand. That's what our published settings look like right there. Also, we have the ability to customize our outputs. So you can see these are the same 2, 4, 6, 7 things that were listed in the publish pod on the previous page. And each one of these things is individually available. Now let me go back one more time to the style mapping. One reason that this is really important, that you go through and you take your time making sure that your style maps are correct, that each of your paragraph styles, which is what these are, is mapped to a specific output style, is that the style mapping is going to be linked to any of the outputs that we do right here. So this is going to make it much easier to map everything once and then be able to output any of these formats using that one style mapping option right there. So it's really significant that you can do that. Within the outputs, what I'm going to show are some examples of what you can do with HTML5, and then I'll go through and show you what what some of these formats look like as you go through. I took this same DITA sample and I simply published it, having done some nominal style mapping. I went through and published to the majority of these formats here. I did skip a couple like the mobile app, which takes a few extra subscriptions and some setup going on with things like the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. And then DPS, Adobe DPS, Digital Publishing System, is also a subscription-based service. So I skipped those two because they're a little bit overly specific for this, for this 1 hour presentation. Okay, let's take a look at some of the outputs in here. So the responsive HTML5. So the first thing that I did was I took that same content, the FrameMaker content. Let's go into FrameMaker right here. Okay, so I took the master book map here, took this all as is, brought it straight into FrameMaker, went to the publish command, and did an export or a publishing of the responsive HTML5 just using all the straight defaults, because I want you to see that even without making any changes whatsoever, what we end up with gives us a table of contents. Now the size that I'm looking at right now, this is, we'll call it the middle layout. This is what you might look at if you were looking at a landscape, like a landscape device, like an iPad or something like that. When the resolution of your device, when the same set of files is displayed on a larger device, much like the screen that I've got right here, I'll just increase the size of the screen, the width of the screen in particular, and you can see that now I get a much more blog-like or website-like interface. So within that interface, I've still got my table of contents. I've got a separate navigation pane. I do have a default logo and a default title up here. I left those specifically and intentionally here to show that that's just part of the default layout if you change absolutely nothing. Along with that, you've got basically keywords in here. You've got index markers that were put in here. So you've got a working index. And then this option right here is for the glossary. In this set of files, I don't have any glossary items defined. Therefore, the glossary doesn't make a lot of sense. You can see as we go through, in the general description, the formatting that we've got here effectively is, if I go back to FrameMaker, it is a straight copy or a straight interpretation of the formatting that I had available inside of my DITA topics in FrameMaker. So for instance, this DT, which is a definition term, this term is formatted using a Times Roman font, and it's simply got a lot of inline formatting applied to it. So if you don't do your mapping, what you're going to end up with is it's going to be formatting that is it's a bit verbose, and that inline formatting is probably not going to be something that's going to be as effective for your end audience as if you clear out all of the inline and you replace it with straight CSS formatting. So that's that first option right there that I just took everything and came straight through, and includes the formatting that we had. This is specifically, or this piece of information with the gray background simply came from the formatting. There was nothing in the CSS that was asking for this. So let me switch over and look at the question pod here and see what we got. Stefan, we got anything interesting so far in the question pod?
I was currently tweeting and posting on Facebook, so I didn't read the chat. Maybe
no worries, we're all good. Okay, so now we've got, along with this default output right here, we've got the same output with some light formatting work applied to it. So instead of using just the formatting that was in the FrameMaker document and using that to come up and try and codge something that looks decent, what I've done is I mapped the title 0 and I mapped the DT element to specific H1s and H2s, which cleaned up my formatting. And that's going to bring down the overall size of the HTML files themselves quite a bit, because you don't have that heavy inline formatting in there. So not only will it be more consistent, but it's going to be a more lightweight, and it's going to be more predictable as you go across various devices. So in here you can see also that I took that short desk information, and I chose to redefine that as what is inside of FrameMaker. We've got the body level. If I go into the publish options, so back in the style mapping here, that heading 1, and then in this area you would have the body level 1, body level 2 options for the mapping right here. So that's going to help out right there. Okay, so now this is still the responsive HTML5. So that means that I showed the largest output right here, and then we also have the tablet, and then this would be perhaps a large phone. So you've got, say that the exploding Galaxy S7, right? Once I get down to a smaller version, then again you're going to have something that is like my Wii iPhone 5S, so something about this size right here. Still absolutely working, still absolutely navigable, and each one is leveraging the form advantages of the format itself. I believe also this desktop version. Okay, on this one I hadn't yet moved the layout. When you see the custom layout, you're going to notice that the glossary disappears right in here. Now I took that same, as I said, we took the same mappings and we formatted it, or we went to each of the individual outputs here. So the next thing that I did is I came over and did some customization here. Now there are two formats. There are two skins that are provided. This happens to be most of the color changes here were by choosing the charcoal skin rather than the standard one, which is blue and white. But you can also see that I was able to really easily identify a graphic. This didn't happen to be this specific size. It just resized into this square area right here. So I've got a custom logo. I've customized the title up here. And also look inside of here, I was able to simply hit a click box. And by removing the check and the checkbox, I got rid of the glossary because I didn't have any glossary items in this area. This content doesn't have glossary elements defined inside of it. So there was no need to confuse people by clicking on this thing and seeing that there is nothing in the glossary, wondering if something's going on. I've got an inherent search capability. And then with this also, you've got the ability, if you're using conditional text, you've got that ability to set up conditions and to filter out this information by condition and allow the end user to filter the content to make the things that are important to them stand out more or be further emphasized. Okay, so those are my again, that one is responsive, so that's great. Let's look at some other outputs here. If I go back to, say, my traditional, if you want to call it that, web help, you can see that I've taken the same mappings and I've provided the same information in a more static or more traditional, older format here, which is my web help. And you can see that everything is still navigable here. We've got everything dialed in. But the problem with, of course, with this format is that we only get one layout. The panes resize, which is great, but the navigation itself doesn't change, and it doesn't take advantage of the form factor that you might have with the various different devices. Okay, with the other formats that we have available, I also provided for you an Epub version. So simply went through and just had to click once or twice to download the most current versions, if you haven't already done this, the most current versions of an Epub conversion tool. There's or I should say a validator to make sure that everything's going to work the way that it is supposed to. And you can see that in the Epub, in this case, I'm using Adobe Digital Editions. You can see that up here. And we're using Digital Editions to view the Epub. You can use whatever Epub reader that you like. But again, you've got the same table of contents that you had before. You've got the same mapping. You've got the same sort of formatting and the same leveraging of the formats themselves, the mapping to the CSS elements, and that's just making it easier to get all of your content wherever you need it, and without having to go through and modify, 2, 3, 4, 5 different setups and 2 or 3, 4, 5 different workflows. It's all the same workflow. You're simply pushing out to different formats using those same standards. Also, I also have the Kindle. So the Kindle, I processed the Kindle file, but I don't have my Kindle reader up and running on this machine. But again, it was just a simple click in order to go ahead and process that file right there. Okay, I did see a question coming through. So Dustin, were you able to handle the question right in there?
Yeah, there was a question about the table of contents and how the table of contents is generated from.
Okay, yeah. Now that's going to, I believe, that's going to reference what Elliot talked about in the last chapter, correct? So when you're looking at the DITA and doing the processing, I believe that's how it's coming up with that processing. Really, the most that I need to know about it is that it's going to manage that table of contents automatically, and so that I don't need to worry about it. Although customizing it, I haven't had a need to customize it, because it's simply, if I need to customize it, I would customize the DITA map or the structure of the DITA files prior to doing the publishing.
There's another question from Donaldus from the Content Era. He's asking about how
mobile apps are fantastic. Mobile apps are going to, as I was mentioning earlier, Tom, as you probably already know, he asks some great questions always. Mobile apps are going to go through the Adobe Typekit system. I'm sorry, not Typekit, but the, Stefan, help me out here. It's the
Phonegap.
The Phonegap. Yeah, it's going to use Phonegap to process those files. And so let's go back real quick. And this is something that I've done in a few different places to produce apps. I haven't had anything that has been sold. As Elliot said, we do these things when there are clients that need to have them done and at a commercial level. But the ability of FrameMaker to produce the mobile app here, let me try something right here. I'm going to close this and see if that's going to get me into those settings. I already saved that file. Okay.
By the way, in the publish pod, your source document is still structured.
Thank you. That's so. And I'll tell you, that one has that one's gotten me more than once. If you get over here and then you save this, you put your cursor over here, then it asks about that structure view. So, Stefan, you're too kind. Okay. In the outputs, we have the ability to produce the mobile app. In here, you're going to make some clear choices in here. But when we go to the application details, then we start to get into things that are fairly easy to set up. I've got some blog posts that cover this, if you haven't already seen those, Tom. Each one of these things is pretty straightforward, but the thing that you're going to need to work on is your Adobe ID for Phonegap. Now, with FrameMaker, and I believe this is, Stefan, you can correct me if I'm not correct on this, each version of FrameMaker allows you to produce one application using FrameMaker. So effectively, we can think of that as being a test application that you might develop in order to get used to the system and see if this is something that you want to do. But if your organization needs exactly one app, then you could do one app that would go to both the Android and the Apple stores, and you would use your ID right here, and then you sign in with your Phonegap account with that user ID. Now, what this will do is it creates the connection, because the application is not developed, it is not compiled on your system. But what we do is, I believe that it takes HTML5 and pushes that through to Phonegap, and then the Phonegap system will go through and process that file and get it ready to go. Now, the Phonegap itself is pretty easy to get through and get that thing to get it processed. And Adobe's done a great job of allowing you access to the Phonegap system. It's done a great job of creating a pretty economical method for developing and producing the code for that. Where once it leaves Adobe's hands, however, and you start going to the Google Play Store, or you start going to the Apple, the iOS development center, you're going to find that you need to start purchasing developer certifications. And at last check, it's 100, I believe, per year for an Apple Developer ID. And so you need to create that Apple Developer ID. And then there are a string of things that you need to identify and need to fill out. So there's effectively some paperwork for the first time that you do that. And so, Tom, have you gone through and done the, do you have your Apple Developers ID? You're not going to publish the ID, or you don't want us to know your Apple Developers ID? If you're, let me go, giving the, Stefan, you were going to say something?
There's a question from Martin Rick. He's currently using TCS4, FrameMaker to PDF, and RoboHelp to online help formats in web, and it works just great for him. And he's asking what would be the real advantages that would justify to swap to FrameMaker and DITA.
Got it. Okay, Tom, I'm gonna swing back and talk about the ability to produce the app and then preview it on your devices, which is a little bit easier. So I'm going to come back to that in just one second, if you don't mind. And Martin, so you're talking about using TCS4, the ability to produce your PDF, and then are you linking your FrameMaker files into RoboHelp to produce your online help? Okay. And that is, when that's working, that's fantastic. It takes a little bit longer to both set that up in terms of getting the whole system right. So first of all, great job on getting a system that you're happy with in updating. One of the advantages of going directly from FrameMaker to those help systems is to recover the time that is spent updating your RoboHelp project with your FrameMaker content. And I'm imagining that makes sense for you, because even when they're linked, you've got to go to, before publishing, you've got to go to your RoboHelp project, and you've got to update and process that FrameMaker information into RoboHelp before you process over into your online help systems. So that's one advantage you would have. You would have, even with FrameMaker 4, I believe you've got the digital publishing, the file publish pod, and so that's going to be a savings, week to week or month to month, depending on how often you publish. The pitch here is not so much to go into DITA for DITA's sake and into DITA for going to online help. So the solution that we have here is fantastic when you have DITA for getting these different outputs. And this is something that I don't believe is going to be terribly easy for you to go into RoboHelp in order to output your DITA content. So when you are working with DITA, this is an excellent way to get your help published out of DITA. It's an excellent way to get your PDF published out of DITA. But DITA in itself isn't a reason. DITA isn't a reason to convert your stuff. Or this ability to publish DITA help is not a reason to go into DITA. You've already got something that works. And if you don't have the need for a structure model, if you don't have something that it would benefit from structure, if you're not doing localization, if you're not doing a number of different things, including worried about Google search, if you're not doing 508 compliance and accessibility, these are all things that are improved when you go to a structure model, but specifically producing PDF and specifically producing online help are potentially not reasons for going strictly to structure. Yeah, it looks like I've got all my heavy hitters on the line, taking care of some of those answers there. So, okay, and let's see, and you've got Dustin, who'd be more than happy to help you evaluate whether or not DITA is an appropriate decision for you, and whether structure is an appropriate decision for you. As Bernard's saying, yeah, we can do all that from, effectively what I'm showing you is all available in the unstructured version of FrameMaker, and that includes the thing that I was talking to Tom about a little while ago, with the mobile app, you can use your one Phonegap ID right here without having to create a subscription to the Phonegap service or to create anything beyond that Phonegap account. And then what you can do is you can use a Google device to test your app on an Android device. So this iOS key only should be used if you plan on developing and delivering to an iOS device. And for all intents and purposes, while not easy, the easiest way to do this is to get your developer license and then push it through the App Store. In contrast, the Android here, the signing key setup for the Android, we can leave this blank. And then what you will do, having left it blank, this will give you a file that you can pass over to your Android device, and you can test this on your phone and see that it works. It's a great first proof of concept. I actually created a few apps. One that I used just locally that actually got some traction was the member directory for the golf club that I'm a member of. On a slightly larger scale, we were also pitching the NFL to do an online version of their rulebook. And that rulebook was going to include video and video analysis of various rules. And we were going to pitch that not only to the NFL, but to the teams and also to people that are, NFL fantasy. NFL fantasy players, because you never want to say fantasy geeks, but it's the geek being the kind of person who would pay $10 for absolutely anything related to the thing they love. That was kind of the target market that we were looking for there. And once you go to that level, you absolutely are going to need to have your developer keys set up for here and here. All right, I did see, Edison, you had a question about the settings file. And what is the settings file or STS file used for? Let me go back here to this place where the STS file is. So the STS file is simply, and there's usually a couple other things in here like the CSS and whatnot, but the STS file, you can think of it as the mappings of all of these elements to their CSS counterparts. So if I go into paragraph styles and I choose body, you can see that it's body level 1. If I go to something that I haven't mapped, like a footnote, you're going to see that it maps by default to this thing called use source style. So the STS is an accounting of everything in all of these expanded areas. So you can see there are quite a few things in there, right? You get an idea of how many elements we have here. It's an accounting of all the mappings to their counterparts, including some stuff down here for how we process images and general settings, different things that we can do, kind of special things we can do with DHTML that we may have put in there. It is also an accounting of what we're doing with our outputs. So our specific settings for all 7 outputs, you can see, perhaps you can't really see that well, the favicon that I've added in here, and that is so that my browser, for instance, depending on my browser and whether it's published, this icon right here would be the special icon that I've created right in there. So I haven't published it; it's not visible right now, but by and large, it's going to. As soon as you publish it, that's going to be something that is visible. The STS has all the settings for all 7 of these outputs here, along with, I believe, it always has, had a copy of the CSS file that goes along with it. So effectively, it's just a zip file with a whole bunch of other things in it. Okay, and moving over into the question pod. So Edison, does that help out? Do you have any other questions on that one? Okay, Martin, glad I could help. And so Angela, I believe that the pictures or the processing of the image files, I believe those are all handled using Acrobat Distiller. And format DPI, whatnot, I generally haven't had to work with the different. So if I go to my image settings, and I know these are kind of overwhelming in here. I haven't had to work with these, and the only time I really have is in a previous version of Frame where there was an oddity with the scale and the width, and I had to put in specific numbers that honestly it was well over a year ago. I don't remember the specific numbers, but it was only when you're in a pinch that you need to work with these. I will say that if you are using, and this is just general, best web practices, if you're doing screen captures and your screen captures are being done or being stored in JPEG format, you're probably going to run into more problems. I've been using PNG files successfully for both my FrameMaker book and for my web publishing for myself and for all my clients for the last couple of years. And I can't think of a problem that I've had in the last 3-4 years doing publishing in that manner. So the short answer is I have just used the defaults. I haven't had any problems with that. Though if you are having issues with that, if you want to reach out to me, and if Stefan, if you can put my email address in there just in case, I'd be more than happy to take a look at anything specific that you're having troubles with, or find out what it is in your workflow that's kind of slowing you down there. And Dustin's mentioning that with the Phonegap service, one of the ways that you can install on your mobile device is to access the QR code on the Phonegap service. So literally it processes on the machine. You can take your device, hit it with the QR code, and it will set a download to your machine. There are another couple of really interesting ways to get the files to your machine. One of my favorites, and feel free to reach out if anybody wants to know the specifics of this, but one of my favorites is to get the Phonegap service, or to get the files that we're processing, to publish to a Dropbox folder. And then I use the Dropbox folder. Having pushed the installer to the Dropbox folder, I go to my mobile device, go to my Dropbox folder, and then use the installer right there. So it saves a few steps and keeps me from getting snowblind as I'm going through and doing the different installs on the various devices. Okay, Keith, outputting to Epub, and you're looking at the file names rather than, So you're getting a different experience than I am, in that I don't have the file names in my TOC. So Keith, are you using DITA, or are you using unstructured frame? And I'm wondering, offhand, I'm wondering if you had an INI that you modified. So I've not seen. I've been doing the Epub of my frame book for 3 years, helping folks do stuff to that end, and I haven't seen file names showing up in there. I'm wondering if it could be something as simple as, with unstructured frame, going through, I have, come on. So if I were to go into my frame book, I can't imagine, but I would at least test that you're not viewing your file names. Well, in fact, I'm viewing my file names here anyway. So that's not it. I was thinking perhaps you had that setting, but this is the way that I process my files all the time. This is just the part 1 of the book right here, but you can see that they're viewing the file names as well. Yep. And then, as Dustin was saying, standard formats like JPEG will work well, but you would, I would suggest or recommend that you evaluate whether JPEG is an appropriate format for specific things. JPEG's great for pictures. JPEG's great for faces and true reality. If it's something with flat tints like a computer screen or an illustration, and not a full painting, but like a computer illustration, generally you're going to have better luck with Ping. That's going to do a better job of representing those flat color areas. That's going to give you a better overall result. Okay, so those are the questions that I see in the chat window. You guys feel free to keep putting stuff in there. And as I come in here, back into the PowerPoint, some things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing any sort of digital publishing, but specifically with DITA, that the mappings that you do, the various paragraph tags, mapping those character tags and table formats, etc., to CSS equivalents, that is absolutely going to be well worth any amount of time that you put into it. The more time you put into it, the cleaner your output is going to appear in the browser, and the cleaner the code is going to be, so the less overhead you're going to have in terms of transferring information to people or trying to display that cruft on individual devices. Definitely want to be using specific CSS definitions, not just that default, and that use source style. That's kind of like an evil thing for me or my clients. I do not like to rely upon that. I have had, in fact, I did have a client that insisted on using their FrameMaker formatting in order to create their output. They specifically wanted to stay away from the CSS, and I politely told them that I wish them a great deal of luck on that endeavor, but that just wasn't something I wanted to be involved with. So you can kind of keep that in mind there. The output can be batched. So from FrameMaker, keep in mind that we can use this batch icon right in here, the multiple outputs, and the multiple outputs will let you create whatever you want. And among the things, among the settings that you have in here are the ability to go to specific output directories. Right, so if you put these things into an appropriate location, if, for instance, you create an output folder that is in your sandbox for your material, rather than delivering it, this is one of the nice productivity tips I try and instill into my clients. If you're publishing to your sandbox, rather than publishing to your local drive, or publishing to a shared location at least, rather than after publishing having to go back in, gather all that information, and then hand it off to somebody, send somebody an email with a zip file, or manually push something over to a server and then let them know that it's there. If you are publishing directly from here into the appropriate sandbox or live location, then you're basically just greasing the wheels and making sure that information gets through with as little effort as possible. Of course, being in the sandbox is important so that you're not inadvertently overwriting live data. You've got a chance to test it, but the information will already be there ready to be approved rather than having to manually push these things along. Take the time to brand your output as well. The branding options that you have available are really intuitive. From the very first time that I looked at the direct publishing from FrameMaker, I was able to go in and take a real heavy look at the output. Let me show you. If you've never seen this before, it's an eye-opening experience. So using this charcoal gray layout, if I'm going to customize that, not only do I have control over all of these different things, but all of these different things, when I go to my basic settings, I end up with a series of options. I end up with a series, basically a legend right down here, so that if I want to change the font that exists right up in here, I've got my layout font. I can click on this thing. It takes me to this option, and I can choose from my available fonts on my system or from a font set that I could have created. And everything in here, the media query says, when should I switch between small, medium, and large? The header lets me cover and control all of my different colors. Each one, all I have to do is go through and look at the legend for each one of these things. We're coming down to, for the content desktop, the ability to change this specific go to top icon to anything that I want it to be. So if I need to match my corporate branding standards on the web, and I've got these graphics, I can leverage these individual graphics into my FrameMaker output without having to get a web designer involved. And each one of these things has a different use, a different function, and a different set of legend buttons and properties that you can control. And it is being a non-web person, I've never wanted to be an HTML code jockey. This is the next best thing to actually having web design experience and skills. Makes things real nice. And that is about everything that we've got for you, Stefan. So taking time to grand that is definitely easier than you would expect. That's about it. We've got all that stuff. So if you guys want to get in touch with me, there's my email address. If you do a Google search on Matt R. Sullivan and whatever it is you want to know if I know about, if it doesn't show up, I probably don't do it.
Okay. Matt.
You're very welcome.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your presentation.
Let me go ahead and...
Good. Okay, thank you very much, Matt Sullivan, for this presentation. Thanks everyone for attending. And we have about 6 minutes left before our next speaker is online on stage, and that's Matt Sullivan. So let me please prepare the room, and thanks again, Matt. And
you are welcome. Bernard, have a good time.
Many more nice webinars with you.